How's everybody doing today? Good. All right, good. And let me do this. Can somebody pass these around for me, please? Can I get this one of my pamphlets and a flyer for a lecture. Flyer for a lecture I'm doing tomorrow also. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for putting this on. This is fantastic what you're doing. Number one, 28 days celebrating African American History Month. There are 28 events. How many people know that? Give everybody a round of applause involved in this, okay? Because this is the first time that I've seen an organization organize 28 different events like this for African American History Month, okay? So this is fantastic. All right, so I'm Michael Imhotep. I'm the founder of the African History Network. I'm the host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. How many people have heard the African History Network show before? Few people. All right, my pamphlet's coming around. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, the African History Network on Facebook. We have 1 million followers there, okay? And what is it that we're celebrating today? Or this whole month, what is it that we're celebrating? Black History? Okay, Black History Month, all right. So, oftentimes we participate in celebrations and don't know the history of the celebration that we're participating in. So who knows the history of African American History Month? Because it's now called African American History Month. How many people know that? It's not because of Donald Trump. It's because of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Who founded that association? Carter G. Woodson, okay? What year was that? It's 1915, okay? So when we celebrate African American History Month, when we talk about Black history, we have to talk about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is known as the father of Black History Month, all right? So just briefly, if we look at some of the history here, okay? It starts in 1926 as Negro History Week. Why was the month of February chosen? Because February was, number one, white people did not give us this celebration. We created this on our own, okay? White people didn't give us anything except a hard time. We have to understand that, all right? Why was the month of February chosen? Anybody know? Frederick Douglass' birthday, and Abraham Lincoln, okay? So when we look at Dr. Carter G. Woodson, number one, he was the second African American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard University. He graduated with a PhD in American history. He was born in 1875 in West Virginia. He was born 10 years after slavery ended, okay? He was born to former slaves. He's going to go on to Berea College, get an undergraduate degree from Berea College. He goes to the University of Chicago, gets another undergraduate degree, another bachelor's degree, and then he goes on to get a master's degree as well. And he was an educator. He taught at Howard University, he taught at some other colleges also, and he also taught in the high schools. And he understood that African Americans, the parents and the children, did not understand their history. We did not understand our history. So in 1915 was the 50th year anniversary of the Civil War ending. When did the Civil War end? What year? Who could tell me? I gave you a hint. What year? Huh? 1865, the Civil War ended, right? July 2nd, 1865. And then what happens in December of 1865? Two really important things happened in December of 1865. Who knows? Say again? Well, that's January 1st, 1863. December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment is ratified, which legally freed enslaved Africans from chattel slavery. It's adopted December 8, 1865. And then December 24th, 1865, on Christmas Eve, a terrorist organization is formed in Pulaski, Tennessee, known as the Ku Klux Klan. Right after the 13th Amendment is ratified, okay? So 1915 was the 50th year anniversary of the Civil War ending and enslaved Africans being set free. So there was a 3-week symposium in Chicago that took place that commemorated that 50-year anniversary, and it commemorated the accomplishments and achievements that African Americans made from 1865 to 1915. So it was at this 3-week symposium that Dr. Carter G. Woodson got the idea to create an organization that preserved, researched, and documented the history and accomplishments and achievements of African Americans in this country, but also on the continent of Africa as well. So September 9, 1915, he and four co-founders, they co-founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in Chicago. Okay, and then 1916 he founds the Journal of Negro History, because back at this time, a lot of the topics that African American historians wanted to talk about in the historical journals, the white historical journals didn't want to publish our papers. So he created the Journal of Negro History so we could publish our papers and deal with our issues, okay? In 1921, he creates Associated Publishers, Inc. This was a publishing company that we had that published textbooks for HBCUs, published textbooks for schools, and also published his books as well. Now, his most famous book was The Miseducation of the Negro, 1933. How many people read The Miseducation of the Negro before? All right, that's a powerful book, because if you read that book today and take out the word Negro and put in Black or African American, you think it was written today. That's how powerful it is, okay? So then, now, during this period of time, 1921, you have the Harlem Renaissance going on. This is right after World War I, which is 1914 and 1918. During World War I, you have what's known as the Great Migration, right? Which starts about 1915, the second year of World War I, it goes 1915 to 1970. During the Great Migration, you have 5 million to 6 million African Americans who migrate from the South up north and out west. Many of us are escaping white domestic terrorism. We're running away from the Ku Klux Klan. We're running away from different groups like the Klan. We're being ran off of our land. Our land is being stolen. We're being shot and killed for our land, because you go back to about 1910, we owned about 20 million acres of land. How many people knew this? Okay, about 1920, we owned about 15 million acres of land. From 1920 to 1975, we lost 14 million acres of land. Okay? So when you study the history of farmers, and you study the history of land acquisition, because right after the Civil War ends, 1865, from 1865 to 1920, we acquired somewhere between 15 to 20 million acres of land, because we had a history in agriculture. But we're ran off of our land. Our land is stolen from us, illegal ways, legal ways, and domestic terrorism. Okay? So when we look at the Great Migration, many of us are fleeing that, and we're looking for a better way of life. So when you look at what was known as Negro History Week, which starts in 1926, the second week in 1926, in February 1926, all this is taking place. You had the Marcus Garvey movement going on. All this is taking place during that period of time, all right? So Negro History Week, Black History Month, African American History Month was never designed to be the only time that we study our history. It was designed to be a time that we celebrate our history. We reflect on our accomplishments and achievements. We look forward to the future. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who once again was an educator, he taught children, he said that, because I've done a lot of research with Dr. Carter G. Woodson. I deal with this, I have a whole presentation dealing with the history of African American History Month, things like this. This is just a synopsis of it. But Dr. Carter G. Woodson said that it did not make sense for school children to study our history for 1 month out of the year, and the other 51 months out of the year, or 48 months, whatever it is, they're not studying our history. He felt that for school children, that should be a period of time that they really show what they have been studying year-round. So unfortunately, the way we celebrate African American History Month oftentimes is wrong, because we never study the history of it. It was never designed to be the only time of the year that we study our history. And when you study it, it's also designed to study the accomplishments and achievements of African people on the continent of Africa as well. It's not just designed to just look at 1619 up until today, okay? So we know that August 20th, 1619, we're told that that Dutch warship came into Jamestown, Virginia, and this is when Africans first came to this land. Now that did happen, but if you study history, you know that African people were here for tens of thousands of years before that, here in this land. If you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, his book thoroughly documents this. How many people are familiar with Dr. David Imhotep? And The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, okay? All right, one person? Oh, my man. Well, yeah, I know he knows him, okay? He's been here a couple of times. He's one of my teachers and a friend of mine. And he deals with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. They're called the Khoisan. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. The Twa are derisively called pygmies in European anthropology and archaeology, things like this. You also had another group that came from West Africa called the Folsom people. I just interviewed Dr. Claude Anderson. How many people are familiar with Dr. Claude Anderson? Wrote Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics, Dirty Little Secrets About Black History, Volume 1 and 2. His latest book came out late 2017. It's called A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. But Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. I just interviewed him on my show January 13th. He talks about the Folsom people. The Folsom people came from West Africa. They came about 13,000, 14,000 years ago here to this land. Folsom, Arizona is named after them. Folsom Prison is named after them. So when we dig into this history, right, there's a reason why we were told that we first came here conquered and shackled in chains and conquered by Europeans and slaves. Even though that did happen, we were here for tens of thousands of years before that. So when we dig into our history and come to the realization, number one, we were lied to. Number two, this was our land stolen from us. There's going to be a tremendous paradigm shift that happens. And if you look at some of the archaeological discoveries that have been coming out over the past 2 or 3 years, even on the continent of Africa, the anthropologists and archaeologists and scientists keep saying that we have to rethink everything. We keep having to push the dates back. In June, and see, I studied these archaeological discoveries, okay? In July 2017, there was a discovery that came out of Morocco. They discovered remains, skeletons of Homo sapiens, modern man, that date back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. And all the scientists, now first of all, on MSNBC, I didn't see anything about this. But if you Google this discovery, Morocco, 350,000 years ago, all the news outlets, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, CNN, Discovery, all of them, National Geographic, they all have articles about this because I read the articles. And they said, this is causing us to have to rethink everything. They said, this is causing us to have to look for evidence of humans in places we never thought. And they said, this predates the earliest known fossils of Homo sapiens, modern man, that dated back 195,000 years ago in Ethiopia. They said, this is causing us to have to rethink everything. And every other month, these discoveries are coming out. So at some point, you can't keep lying and hiding the truth. The truth is coming out. So when we look at this month, everybody okay? Yeah. Okay, so when we look at this year's theme for African American History Month, okay, and I'll wrap up in a few minutes here, all right? Okay, all right. So when we, okay, I'll keep going a few more minutes. So when we look at this year's theme for African American History Month, how many people know there's a theme each year for African American History Month? And when you go to asala.org, my man, he's at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History all the time. When you go to asala.org, which is the ASALH.org, it's the official website of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. This is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded. Each year, they have a theme for African American history. So this year, the theme is Black migrations, okay? And we know that this is the 400th year anniversary of those 20-some-odd Negroes, those Africans coming into Jamestown, Virginia. But very quickly here, if we look at this year's theme, ASALH's 2019 theme, Black Migrations, emphasizes the movement of people of African descent to new destinations and subsequently to new social realities. While inclusive of earlier centuries, this theme focuses especially on the 20th century through today. So we're really looking at the Great Migration. And we see the Great Migration taking place during World War I. We see at the end of World War I, 1918, the next year, 1919, what is 1919 called in history? Who can tell? It's called the Red Summer. You know why it's called the Red Summer? Because there were over 25 major race riots in this country in 1919. Why? Because when these white men went away to go fight in World War I, they had jobs. When they came back, the jobs were being filled by African Americans who were migrating from the South up north, largely, and also by immigrants coming to this country. So now the African Americans, these former slaves, are doing these jobs, right? So this caused over 25 major race riots all across the country. So these white men came back, then they have jobs, but they brought weapons with them. They brought skills on how to fight and how to kill. And then you had African Americans who served in World War I, African American men, and they weren't punks, they fought back. We saw this happen. We saw this happen in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm doing a lecture tomorrow. The flyers come around? I'm doing a lecture tomorrow dealing with the history of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That attack took place June 1st, 1921. What's not talked about is that African American men, you have former World War I veterans, African American men who lived in Black Wall Street, North Tulsa, and they shot back. They fought back. Okay? And so during this period of time, you had what's called the New Negro. And the New Negro, well, they were called race men. And it was a new attitude for African Americans. They said, look, we fought in all the wars. We fought in the American Revolutionary War. We fought in the War of 1812. We fought in World War I. They said, we're not coming back and dealing with segregation and the racism. There are going to be some changes, right? So there was a whole new attitude at this period of time. So when we look at the black migrations and we look at a whole shift that happens in this country because of the Great Migration. Okay, we look at things like, for instance, June of 1941. How many people are familiar with Executive Order 8802? Executive Order 8802. This is an example of leveraging. This is an example of leveraging your power to push an agenda. So this is June of 1941. This is before the U.S. starts fighting in World War II. President Roosevelt is the president. Okay, before, a few years before this, President Roosevelt talks about how America can become the arsenal of democracy. The arsenal of democracy. What this meant was America could produce military weapons for the Allies. Okay, M5 tanks, B-24 Liberator bombers. So if you look at the history of Detroit, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, they all had government contracts from 1942 to 1945 to build this military weaponry. The Guardian building in downtown Detroit was a headquarters for this. So you have a lot of African Americans migrating up north to go work in these different plants. Well, what happened was A. Philip Randolph, who was the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. A. Philip Randolph forced the issue to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he threatened to put 100,000 African Americans marching on Washington in opposition to President Roosevelt if he didn't desegregate the jobs in the Defense Department, these defense jobs. So President Roosevelt, June 25th, 1941, because of this threat, he signed Executive Order 8802, which desegregated these jobs and opened up a lot of opportunities for African Americans. Okay, this is history. So when we look at these black migrations, what's going to take place is as we're going up into Gary, Indiana, as we're going up into Detroit and Newark, New Jersey, things like this, you're going to have racial conflicts. You're going to have race riots. You had a big race riot here in Detroit in 1943, not 1967, 1943, during World War II. Okay? So as these migrations take place, you're going to see these different problems happen as well. And then you're going to see efforts to keep African Americans from gaining political power. So if we look at now in the city of Detroit, I don't know how it is here in Inkster, and I'll wrap up here in a few minutes. If we look at the city of Detroit, when gentrification started really hitting the city of Detroit, or right before it, they changed the city council from city council persons representing all of the city. They changed it to districts. It was districts early on. It was districts when the Great Migration was taking place. But as African Americans started moving into certain areas of the city, because we were discriminated against, even though they had the colored signs and white signs, we were discriminated against, and we were sent into different parts of the city, right? As we start populating these different segments of the city, they change it from districts, they change it to being a city council person represents all of the city, because they realize, well, wait a second, if these black people start moving into these segments of the city and they start voting, then they can start putting African Americans on the city council. So when we started gaining population power, they changed the rules on us. And then they changed them again because you had gentrification taking place and they had white people moving into certain segments of the city. It's the same thing. But see, we don't understand history, so we can't see this game that they're playing. All right? So very quickly, just give me a couple more minutes. Let me wrap up with this here. So when we look at black migrations, right, and the history of this, African American migration patterns included relocation from southern farms to southern cities, from the south to the northeast, Midwest and west, from the Caribbean to U.S. cities, as well as to migration labor farms and the immigration of noted African Americans to Africa and to European cities such as Paris and London and the end of World War I and World War II. Such migrations resulted in a more diverse and stratified interracial and intraracial urban population amid a changing social milieu, such as the rise of the Garvey movement in New York, Detroit, and New Orleans, as Marcus Garvey, Universal Negro Improvement Association. And Garvey was an immigrant, by the way, from Jamaica, okay? You have the emergence of both black industrial workers and black entrepreneurs, the growing number and variety of urban churches and new religions, new music forms like ragtime music, okay, like Scott Joplin, blues and jazz, white backlash as the Red Summer of 1919 that I talked about, the blossoming of visual and literary arts as in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Paris in the 1910s and 1920s, okay? Okay, yeah, I get it. The theme Black migrations equally lends itself to the exploration of the century's later decades from spatial and social perspectives, with attention to new African Americans because of the burgeoning African and Caribbean population in the U.S. Northern African Americans return to the South, because a lot of us are being gentrified out of the North. We're going back down South now. Racial suburbanization, inner city hypo-ghettoization, health and environment, civil rights and protest activism, electoral politics, mass incarceration, and dynamic cultural production, okay? So that deals with this year's theme, 2019, for African American History Month, Black Migrations. If you go to asalh.org, asalh.org, they have this information. You can share this in your classrooms, and they have a lot of teaching tools there, so we don't have to recycle the same 20 sanitized Negroes every year for African American History Month either, all right? So, I want to thank you for your attention. Thanks for your time. Thanks to everybody who have organized this. Special thanks to Councilwoman Watley as well. Tomorrow, the flyers came around. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe. I'm doing a free lecture dealing with the history of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And come on out. And we have the information on my website also. And next door, across the hall, we have vendors over there. Our vendor table is over there. We have some other vendors. All my DVD lectures are there. I have one dealing with the history of Black Wall Street, dealing with the film Black Panther, history of African American History Month, and others, okay? So once again, thanks for your attention. I want to say Asante Sana Imhotep, and make sure we teach our children the true meaning of African American History Month and what it's all about. Thank you. Peace. Do we have, okay, we have time for questions? All right, let's go to questions. Yes. Well, tomorrow I'll be at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, 71 Oakman Avenue. Oakman, O-A-K-M-A-N. What time is your event tomorrow, sister?
Tomorrow is a scavenger hunt.
Scavenger hunt, okay. And that was...
it starts at noon and goes till 3 o'clock.
Okay, so when you finish with the scavenger hunt, if you're going, come on over. I don't want to interfere with anything they're doing because they put a lot of work into it. But it's 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, located at 71 Oakman Avenue, O-A-K-M-A-N, Highland Park, Michigan. Did you get a flyer?
Yes.
Okay, it's a free event, donations accepted, come on out. And each Saturday in February, I'm doing lectures there at 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. I don't want to interfere with anything they're doing, because I know they put a lot of work into it. So when you get finished coming to the events that I can and Councilwoman Watley put on, then come on over to Nandy's Knowledge Cafe. Presentation is going to blow you away. Because I go deep in, I do with a timeline of history leading up to 1921 also. I saw another question. Somebody else had a question? Yes, sister. African History Network. Asalh.org. 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 That's the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. My website is AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. One more question, if there's one more question. And also, you know, the film Black Panther is back in the theaters at select AMC theaters. They're doing 2 showings a day for free. February 1st to February 7th. It won big at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. The film ties directly into African history, African culture, African language, African spiritual systems. This is a deep, deep movie. Okay, I've done extensive research on Black Panther and how it relates to African history, things like this. All right, okay, so let me wrap up with that. Say Wakanda forever, because Wakanda is a real word. Just so y'all understand, even though it's a fictitious place, it's a real word. It's a Bantu word. It's in Native American languages. Okay, Wakanda means possesses secret powers in the Sioux Indian language, Omaha Ponca language. So it's a real word. So it's a deep movie on multiple levels. Thank you, sister.